when he was a little boy. This is probably back in the late 20s, early 30s, somewhere maybe 30s, somewhere around there. And so he grew up in that situation. Even when Christmas and the holidays came, his parents didn't come to visit him. He had it with the nuns, and they would do a little something special with him. When he hit 17, he lied about his age, got into the army, and went to war. And he never, all these stories that I hear about him, he never said them. They just come from my mom, because either she heard bits and pieces or related. But there's one story, and I'm telling you, the war destroyed him mentally for the rest of his life. I mean, it was tough because
most of them did a good job of compartmentalizing their memories, and that's why they never talked about it.
No.
They're talking about it more now than they ever did in their life, and I think they're doing it now. And I'm talking about the greatest generation. They're in their 90s, late 80s, early 90s, if they're on the young end.
Right.
Most of them are gone. In fact, it was quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a report came out that said exactly half of all the survivors of World War II, the vets,
right,
have now passed. And this was like over 10, maybe 15 years ago. So from that point forward, less than half of them remain. Well, that was quite a ways ago. So now we're just dealing with a tiny minority of the youngest people, which is, it's kind of interesting. Did you remember a couple of years ago there was a guy that was discovered to be a Nazi back in the day, and he's in his 90s, and they want to try him.
It wasn't back in the day. It was like within the last few years. Yeah. When I read that, I was like, huh?
Well, here's my argument. If you look at his age and you do the math, he would have been one of the youngest people in the Nazi for the Nazis.
Right.
He'd been like 18 at the end of the war.
Well, Hitler was recruiting children.
Right.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 towards the end of the war.
So my argument was, what role did he really play?
He could have been up at the top of the echelon of the decision-making process.
He would have been the lowest-ranking foot soldier who didn't have any kind of a say in any policy.
That was sweeping the floors.
Yeah, and all of a sudden here he is in his mid-90s being held responsible for World War II.
Right.
Well, anyway.
Wikipedia says on May 27th, 2008, which was 8 years ago, they're documenting that as the last surviving World War I vet died in 2008.
Oh, I don't believe that. You think?
World War I?
Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, they'd be pretty old. Oh, that makes sense because just past this past week, the last person that was born in the 1800s just died, I think. That
lady, no. She's 116. She's born in 1899.
Okay. And she's the last remaining born in
1899. Right, in the 1800s. Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that makes sense because if you look at the years for World War I, it was like, 1915 or something like that? Right. 1915, 1918, something like that?
Right.
1914, 18?
And we didn't get in until the very end, 1917.
In 2008, then, it was the last surviving World War I? That makes sense.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, for our parade every year, there would be a whole group of World War I vets.
Oh.
And I remember thinking, those guys are freaking old.
Right. Well, I mean, if they lived to, 80s, 90s, 95 years old, and to a kid, 95 is forever. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also a lot of people these days don't know, but back when we were kids, if you made it to 90, if you ever even ran into somebody that was 90 or older, this is like the oldest person you ever seen in your life.
Right.
Because it was rare. Right. It was rare to make it to 90. But
they're saying the boom of centurions. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, I think so.
Centurions.
Yeah, those with one eye. That's
a cyclops.
That's the half horse, half man.
Oh, is it a centurion?
I don't know. It's not a millennial.
Wow. So People are hitting a
millennial is when you've reached 1,000 years old.
Yikes! And we've got them running around
They're
everywhere,
all over the place.
Right?
Wow.
So here recently, the boom of people hitting 100 is not uncommon anymore nowadays. Oh yes, and if you want to be part of the show, the call-in line 513-888-1538. We'll announce that again so that you can remember. But write that down.
Just make sure of that because I tweeted that and I wanted to make sure that was the right number.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, is this like your mother-in-law's phone number?
They be going to town. So check this out. Let's see. On thedailywire.com, they reported on the Hiroshima thing with Obama, and the headline of their article is thedailywire.com. The headline is, President Obama gives one of the most repulsive speeches in American history in Hiroshima. And then he goes on, just a quick blast. The very first couple sentences. Friday, President Obama said America's use of the A-bomb to end the threat of Japanese fascism sprang from Americans' desire for conquest. Suggested that America had ushered in an age of atomic warfare and said that we could achieve, quote, world without nuclear weapons if we, unquote. And then the writer says, if we only clapped for Tinkerbell. This came shortly after his visit to Vietnam, where the White House announced that America would start selling weapons to the communist dictatorship. Yes, our president is a total disgrace.
I concur.
It's just, I'm beside myself with this whole article. I got into it a little bit on and off, and I just fell into the whole World War II part of this, and it enrages me that this man that has been afforded the freedom and the luxury of living in America, and hasn't worked a day in his life to be serious. I mean, to be a community disorganizer, to be in college all your life. I mean, this guy is really an unqualified, pathetic individual. And for him to go and do this on Memorial Day weekend, it's just even more disgusting. But Jim Hoff from the Gateway Pundit, which I recommend, he's got some great articles. He says, Obama ignores the Japanese atrocities in Hiroshima. U.S. decision to drop the atomic bomb arose from humanity's worst instincts. Barack Obama does it again. The jackass apologized for American actions in World War II and ignored the evils of the Imperial Japan. The Imperial Japanese military committed thousands of war crimes in World War II, resulting in the deaths of millions of civilians and prisoners of war.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and blast on Japan. I mean, war is war. You know, that's what happens in war. But I am going to blast on Obama for somehow acting like what happened in World War II requires an apology from us. Good. I don't want to say anything. I have the Secret Service knocking on the door.
So do you want to hear what Truman said about the A-bomb when he was questioned about it?
Sure.
President Truman said, that bomb caused the Japanese to surrender, and it stopped the war. I don't care what the crybabies say now, because they didn't have to make that decision then.
What did he say that last week?
Yeah, we pulled him up.
You did a weekend at Bernie's?
Yeah, we did a weekend at Bernie's. No, that's what he said back in the day. They said that.
So there were crybabies back then?
Yes!
You know, that sounds a little different. Was that an actual quote?
That's what Wikipedia says.
Oh, God. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Anonymous, in the basement of some undisclosed location in your underwear.
No, it was Joel Pollack from Breitbart that inserted that clip into his article. He put that in his article.
Okay, well, I'll take.
And I trust Joel. I trust Breitbart. I mean, they're pretty good people, but and he may have paraphrased it. However, the baby boomers of the day, can you imagine in the 60s and 70s what they'd be saying? How to be crying. oh, look what you did. You dropped the bomb. Well, look at the, and that's something else. Look at the music of the day. Pink Floyd, The Wall, the album. There's one song where he says, "Mother, did we have to drop the bomb?" You know what I mean? There's a lot of connotations about World War II, and then he sings a lot about the wall that Russia put up in Germany. Just all these, and that was in the 60s and late 60s, early 70s, and a lot of those singers were with the hippie era. It was it was the hippie era. And for those of you too young to know the hippie era, think of grunge and how they didn't shower and they all stunk. And they're like, we're grunge, man. We're grunge. No, dude, you need to take a bath. You stink. Well, grow their hair longer and wear really ugly, funky clothes, and now you're a hippie.
Lots of paisleys and
rainbow pants and
yeah. I mean, you see it now. They're stuck in the past.
So I mean, could you imagine? I would absolutely believe that they would come at Truman with something of that nature.
Well, it seems like they've been indicting him since then. I'm actually surprised that it was so early that he had to say himself that everybody's a bunch of crybabies. Truman actually lived to be pretty old, actually.
Okay, well then I'm sure
so the quote must have come late in his life when people were questioning whether or not he should have been bombing.
Right. No, absolutely.
But I don't know. So
in this article, he lists just a handful of things that the Japanese did, and I just read a couple of them off to you. In the Bangka Island Massacre, 1942, slaughter of Australian Army nurses, the Bataan Death March, 1942, the Sadakan Death March, 1945, murder and cannibalism on the Koda tract, 1942.
You're not good at these Japanese
not good at these. No, I'm not good
Japanese pronunciation.
Conscripting women for sexual slavery in the Japanese army brothels, 1937 and 1945. Mutilation and murder of Dutch civilians. Murder and cannibalism captured American pilots. Murder of American pilots and crew member in Midway, 42. The bombing of hospital ship, 42. The sinking of a hospital ship, 43. Extermination of survivors of merchant vessels sunk by the Japanese, 43 through 45.
I got one to add to it. During the Doolittle raid.
Oh, yes!
Which was our first actual attack on Japan. It was in Japan mainland or whatever. And the Doolittle Raiders went over in their little B-25s, I believe. And they had to crash land into China. And China, a lot of people don't realize this, and I didn't realize this. I'm glad I watched this documentary on it. I thought China was our ally, so what's the problem? Right. And so they crash land and they're fine, right?
I kind of thought the Japanese took over China.
Exactly. Okay. It was Japanese occupied. So they had to hide, and they went like hundreds of miles on foot. And the only reason they were able to make it was because the Chinese civilians were hiding them in their houses. And the Japanese knew these guys got to be around here somewhere.
I would see their planes.
And they were torturing and killing Chinese civilians because they either suspected or knew that they were hiding out these Americans. And some of them, a couple of them, the Doolittle Raiders were executed because they were caught. Some of them were POWs for a long time, and some of them escaped. But the point is that what they did to the Chinese civilians to try to get them to give up the Americans, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't give up these heroes in their mind because they were just amazed that these guys, these Americans, came and bombed mainland Japan, and they wouldn't give them up even if it meant being tortured to death.
Wow.
And that's what happened.
That's amazing. The one and only story that I've been told that I know of my grandfather in World War II was when he said there was a big, huge open field and a battle